216 BCE. The Roman Republic, still reeling from its disastrous defeats at the Trebia and Lake Trasimene, had assembled the largest army in its history. 8 legions, reinforced by allies, swelled their numbers to nearly 86,000 men. Their goal? To crush Hannibal Barca and end his terrifying campaign through Italy once and for all. Hannibal, the Carthaginian mastermind, had spent 2 years devastating the Italian countryside, outmaneuvering every Roman army sent against him. Now, near the small town of Cannae, he stood with an army of 50,000 soldiers, a force outnumbered but not outmatched. He had no intention of meeting the Romans in a straightforward fight. Instead, he would execute one of the most brilliant tactical maneuvers in military history. The Roman commanders, Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro, were polar opposites. Paulus was cautious, while Varro was reckless. On the morning of August 2nd, Varro, in command for the day, ordered the Roman army to advance. He was determined to overwhelm the Carthaginians with sheer numbers, packing his heavily armored legions into a deep formation, hoping to smash through the enemy lines. Hannibal, however, had other plans. He arranged his troops in a crescent formation. His weakest forces, made up of Gauls and Iberians, stood in the center, while his veteran African troops were positioned on the flanks. He knew that the Romans, hungry for a decisive victory, would attack the center with all their might. As the battle began, Hannibal's cavalry, led by the brilliant Hasdrubal, clashed with the Roman horsemen on the flanks. The Numidian cavalry harassed the Roman right, while the heavier Carthaginian cavalry charged the Roman left. In a whirlwind of speed and precision, the Carthaginian riders overwhelmed their enemies, driving them from the field. Meanwhile, the Roman infantry crashed into the Carthaginian center. Hannibal's Gauls and Iberians gave ground, step by step, allowing the Romans to push forward. To the Romans, it seemed like victory was within reach, but they failed to realize the danger. As the Roman legions pressed deeper, they unknowingly walked into Hannibal's trap. His African veterans, stationed on the flanks, suddenly swung inward, hitting the Romans from both sides. The crescent formation had transformed into a deadly encirclement. Then came the final blow. With the Roman cavalry scattered, Hasdrubal's horsemen circled back and attacked the Romans from behind. In an instant, the largest army Rome had ever assembled was completely surrounded. The battle turned into a slaughter. Packed together so tightly they could barely lift their weapons, the Roman soldiers had no room to maneuver. Carthaginian swords and spears cut them down with ruthless efficiency. Hours passed, but the killing continued. Some Romans attempted to flee, but few made it out. Aemilius Paulus, wounded and unable to escape, refused to abandon his men and was cut down. Varro, the architect of the disaster, managed to escape with a small group of survivors, but for the rest of the Roman army, there was no mercy. By the end of the day, over 50,000 Roman soldiers lay dead, the greatest single-day loss in Roman history. The once invincible legions had been annihilated. Hannibal had achieved the perfect victory, but despite his triumph, he faced a bitter reality. He lacked the resources to march on Rome itself. Though Rome was shaken, it was not broken. In the years that followed, the Republic would rebuild, learning from its mistakes, and slowly turn the tide of the war. But at Cannae, Hannibal had demonstrated the pinnacle of battlefield strategy, a maneuver so devastating that it would be studied by military commanders for centuries to come. His name would forever be remembered, not just as a great general, but as one of the greatest tacticians in history.